What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Bucks channel on the Fantasy Football Network. My name is John, also known as Tampa Sports Guy, but best known as TSG. You can find me on Instagram and also on TikTok. That's one word, Tampa Sports Guy. I post about all of the professional Tampa sports teams. That's the Rays for Major League Baseball, the Lightning in hockey, and the Bucks for football, obviously. I grew up in Tampa. Some of my best memories are going to the Lightning, Game 7 to win the Stanley Cup way back in 2004, watching the Bucks win the Super Bowl the year before, and watching the Bucks win the Super Bowl even more recently. But that's not why you guys are here. You're here for fantasy football talk, so let's dive right in. Week 1, here we are, football season is upon us. Normally week 1, it's basically a toss-up. We have no idea what's going to happen. We've seen a couple of preseason games. Most of the starters have, sat on the bench, tried to avoid injury, but this year with the Bucks, we're actually blessed with the fact that we played the exact same team in week 1 last year. The Bucks faced off against the Cowboys on prime time last year, if you'll remember. It was a shootout, a nerve-wracking game as a Bucks fan. It was a come-from-behind win for the Bucks coming off of their Super Bowl against the Chiefs. We won on a last-second field goal by Ryan Suckup, and we didn't really look good. We had a major injury to Sean Murphy-Bunting during the game. We'll get more into the details because I'm basically building on that game as a comparison and a predictor for what we can expect this year. Now, it's entirely possible, we know how fantasy football works, that the exact opposite will happen. The teams will learn from what happened last year, prepare for that specifically, and do the exact opposite. So if you'd like, just do the opposite of what I say, but I recommend doing what I say because I think there's a thing or two we can learn from week 1 last year. So let's dive right in. We'll start with the man of the hour, Tom Brady, who, if you've been watching SportsCenter lately, his name has been front and center in the news, which, in my opinion, he's going to be laser focused, ready to go. Last year, he threw 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 380 total yards, just week 1. I think he's going to come out and light up the Cowboys again. He's going to be Tom Brady. That's enough said. He knows what to do. He's going to, I think, in a dome, week 1, silence the crowd, most likely. We can expect Tom Brady to be Tom Brady and put up some, if not 4 touchdowns, we know he's going to move the ball and command the huddle, and he's not going to disappoint for fantasy. That would be my expectation. So we'll move on quickly from Tom Brady to the running back position. Leonard Fournette last year, it might surprise you, he only had 9 attempts for 32 yards rushing. His longest run was 7 yards, and that may have been just the nature of the game since it was a shootout. We just abandoned the run. But I expect him to not necessarily have a huge game this week, but kind of improve upon what we saw last year from him. I don't expect a repeat necessarily of that exact performance. I think he'll get more carries. The fact that this year Tom Brady's barely played in preseason, I think we'll look to establish the run on the road, and hopefully Fournette will get some more carries. As a Bucks fan, I think that would help the team win, open up play action pass, but especially for fantasy, for Fournette, look for that to happen. Last year, Ronald Jones, who is no longer with the team, he had 4 attempts for only 14 yards. So if you're in a deeper fantasy league, my comparison this year would be Rachaad White, who is a new rookie being compared to Edgerrin James. I don't think he's going to do much this week. He might get a carry here or there, but don't look for him to put up any big fantasy numbers. Moving on to wide receiver. Last year, the story was Mike Evans matched up against Trayvon Diggs. Mike recorded his 3rd worst total of the season last year as far as total yards. He had 3 receptions for 24 yards. Trayvon Diggs basically shadowed Evans throughout the game. I expect better from Mike this year. I think his upside maybe is limited by the matchup, especially with the injuries, which I'll touch on in a second, that the Bucks have at the wide receiver position. I think he's going to get more targets regardless of who he's facing. Look for Mike to have a better performance, but maybe not a boom type performance. Last year, AB, who obviously is no longer with the team, actually led the Bucks in totals last year. He had 5 receptions for 121 yards. Longest was 47 yards and a touchdown. And Godwin, who is recovering from an ACL tear and may or may not play this week, he had 9 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown last year in week 1. So that tells me that the Cowboys really limited Mike, but were exposed on the secondary receiver targets, which it's hard to say. Godwin and AB were secondary. They were studs and are studs, except AB's out of the league. But you know what I mean. Godwin's a stud if he plays. I think just the ACL tear kind of limits his upside. I can see the Bucs not wanting to overdo it week 1. I think he just had his knee brace taken off for the first time during practice, if I'm not mistaken, recently. So back to the point I was making, the fact that Godwin and AB put up big points, I'm expecting Julio Jones and Russell Gage, if he plays, to take their place. Now, Russell Gage is coming back from a hamstring tweak himself, so my pick at wide receiver is that Julio Jones is going to have a big week in fantasy football in his Buccaneer debut, and I'm sure we'll see that all over TV. At tight end, we have Gronk retiring over the offseason, and O.J. Howard making his way to Buffalo before eventually landing in Houston. So between new addition Kyle Rudolph and Cam Brate, I look at the comfort level between Brate and Brady. Now, Brate is likely touchdown dependent to have a good week, but he does get a lot of touchdowns. So between those two, I expect a better performance out of Brate in week 1. At kicker, this is the kind of game, simply put, where I could see the Bucs with a new offensive line, basically thrown together with the injuries and the surprise retirement of Ali Marpet, Alex Kappa leaving the team. I could see the offensive line kind of limiting drive potential. So what I'm trying to say is I could see the Bucs move the ball easily, but not necessarily convert all of their drives into touchdowns, which sets up a big opportunity for Ryan Suckup to have a big game at the kicker position. And defense, last but not least, they were shredded last year against Dak. We lost Ndamukong Suh and Jason Pierre-Paul in the offseason, and we have Akeem Hicks now on the defensive line and drafted Logan Hall. So there's some good names there, but they're unproven. They don't have the cohesiveness of playing together. So it makes me question, I don't have confidence in the defensive line's ability to consistently put pressure on Dak. And the fact that he shredded our secondary last year for 450 yards makes me a little scared for what is going to happen this year. Now, I expect the defense to do better than that. We have some veteran additions in the secondary from the offseason. So fingers crossed as a fan that we improve upon last year, but if you have the chance, don't play the Bucs the Bucs defense this week against the Cowboys. So it was nice to meet all of you. It's going to be fun talking football, talking fantasy football this season. Come check me out again next week. Good luck week 1 in fantasy, and talk to you next time.